Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me to discover the truth beneath the surface. So, today, as it turns out, I have some time on the road, which was a little bit unexpected. So, figured I would seize this opportunity and check in with you, the audience. So, hopefully, everybody is off to a good start with their day and their week. I know things are getting more and more intense with every passing day, and I'm going to touch upon some of those points, but just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for all of the continued support. Please continue to offer me whatever comments, whatever commentary, whatever thoughts and opinions you have. I welcome it all, and I really do appreciate the love and the respect and the admiration from the audience. So, I was reflecting a little bit this morning, and there's been a lot of talk, I think, around basically pretty much every digital family within this Patriot movement, that we've kind of gotten to a point now where the Patriot movement is in some ways really kind of falling apart. And I don't want to say that it sounds terrible to put it that way, because I mean, it's not as if I feel as if all is lost or anything like that, or, everything is falling apart in general. But the movement itself, I think there's been a lot of infighting. There's been a lot of, I think what's happening is that people are really, like I talked about the other day, people are losing patience. And when people start to lose patience and they're under an extreme amount of stress, and they have been for quite some time, and situation is continuing to get worse and worse and worse, and it doesn't appear that there's any end, at least in sight. Let's put it that way. I mean, we can believe that there's an end coming soon, but we don't actually know. And I think people are really starting to come apart. A lot of people are really just kind of, they're done. And that really is having ripple effects, I think, across our entire movement and across our entire community. Now, I'm not here to start pointing fingers at people, and I'm not here to lecture anybody. I think folks are pretty well versed. If you've been listening to my show, I mean, you're pretty well versed in my opinion on the plan and the devolution process. And the reality is, as I've discussed, is things are going to get continually worse until we actually see this breakthrough moment. But as I've also discussed, we really do need to see a real shift in the overt action, really, the lack of overt action that we've been seeing up until this point, or should I say not seeing. I think we need to start seeing some more things come out into the public view. And I remember a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, or it was probably about a couple of weeks, I was talking about how, Simon Parks was talking on his podcast about the White Hats and how they had made a decision that they were going to start to change tactics, because really we've sort of hit a plateau in terms of awakening, in terms of folks being prompted to come to our side. And really, I think more importantly, they recognize, as I was talking about, that patriots are losing patience. Now, it doesn't mean across the board that everyone out there has lost faith in the plan, and people are just throwing it overboard. But as I've continually discussed, it's getting more and more real for everyone. And I think what's happening is that with every passing day, this wave of evil, regardless of whether or not it's a pantomime or whether it's real, people are experiencing this. They're experiencing the effects of it. It's having an enormous stressful impact on their life, and that's just putting it mildly. And with every passing day, it continually gets worse. And for me, in my personal life, that's very, very true. I mean, the longer this thing goes on, the more my life, my individual personal life, is being affected, as I know yours is. And as these mandates and as these insane decrees continued, it really is emboldening people. I mean, I know I've told folks that I live in an extremely brainwashed zombie liberal area. And I can tell you that the longer these mandates and these lockdowns and, all of this nonsense, the longer it continues, the more it emboldens these freaks who really are, just authoritarians, and they exist. They're not just at the highest levels of power. I mean, they're literally all throughout our society. And the type of people we're talking about. I mean, like most people really aren't this way, but there are some people who they just get off on telling people what to do, and they get off on power and domination and control. And it's permeated all levels of our society. I mean, I experience it at work. I mean, I know people in my personal life who are like this, and it's really, I think it's a sign of the times that we've gotten to a point where, at least on the surface, in this pantomime, but even before this, even before we were talking about a pantomime, long before that, these types of people have risen in our society, and they've been able to, because of the corrupt power system and structure as we know it anyway. These are the type of people who advance in this system, which of course we're moving out of, thank God. But the frustration it just is boiling over for people, because we're just sick and tired of this nonsense and living in this world of complete deception. And I have to be truthful and open and honest about that, because if I'm not, I wouldn't be telling folks the truth. As patient as of a man as I am, I would be lying to you if I told you that, I wanted to wake up one more single day in this false reality, in this matrix. I am sick and tired of never being able to know what's real, what's not real, and having to, you know, like I talk about all the time. I mean, the most important thing that I pray for, among the most important things I pray for is discernment, because I recognize that, without discernment in this day and age, in this world, you have absolutely no chance at having any kind of baseline of truth, because everything is a lie, everything is false. More and more information is coming out now about the Rittenhouse case. The things that I talked about a few days, or not even really, just like the day before the verdict came out, or a couple of days before the verdict came out. And now all of a sudden, people are realizing there's a whole bunch of strange things going on with that case. From what I understand, the judge is a high-level Mason. There's a lot of talk about the identity of Rittenhouse, and could he possibly be a crisis actor? And I'm not going to get into the specifics on that. I think folks can do their own research. I'm not here to, because honestly, I don't even really know at this point what my conclusion is. I need more information, but I'll tell you, information's coming out. And then you've got the foot disappearing in the floor in the courthouse, the green screen. And I suspect as time goes on, there's probably going to be even more stuff, because that's usually the way it goes. Like I said, first couple anomalies get pointed out, gets everybody's attention. More people are looking at it, more people, more eyes, more anomalies. And then before you know it, you got a whole bunch of, a mountain of evidence, really. And you realize what the truth is. And I think that that's probably where we're headed, because there's something about this whole situation that just stinks. And, I've talked about it. I'm not going to get into it again, but, it's just another example, where people are, even in a situation where we as patriots felt like we were handed a win, and really we were, based on the issues and the law and everything that was in question, we were handed a win. But to think that even something like this could be fabricated, could be, false flag, could be whatever you want to call it, however you want to define it, however you view the situation. The point is if it's not 100% true the way it was reported, and I can probably guarantee you that it's not, well, at least in some ways, there's more to the story. I believe that. Then, what kind of world are we living in, where you just can't believe anything? And I think that really is just, I think in some ways, of course, it's the frustration that we haven't seen the intervention, but I think that is what's ultimately driving people's rage and frustration. This lack of justice, which I've talked about many times, that's really driving people's anger. It's the lack of justice, and it's the constant deception. And I think the reason that there's so much infighting in the Patriot community right now is because a lot of people are talking more and more about the deception of the white hats and their role in putting together all of these, I guess you could say, propaganda type stories in order to fight this psychological war. And I've addressed this many, many times now, but I will say this in terms of the necessity of how the white hats had to battle against the cabal. I've talked about that, but I will say this. I think that it's completely wrong on every level that psychological operations, or psyops as we call them, to be run on the people. I'm just going to keep it right now in the context of America, on the American people. I mean, it used to be that psyops were illegal to run on the American people. And now, thanks to Obama, who I believe legalized it, I know he was the one who legalized it. I think it was in 2014. All of a sudden, it just became legal to propagandize the American people and to run psyops on the American people. Why, in God's name, would you want to do something like that? Unless you had an evil intention. I mean, we all know the answer to that, of course. But that's why progressively the mainstream media and big tech and everything has gotten more and more weaponized against us, because it was always intended to do that. And what Obama did was he just took the legal restraints off of what was already being done, so they could really kick it into high gear toward their end game. But yeah, I mean, the president of the United States back in 2014, he made it legal to run psyops against the American people. And who specifically were they targeting? Well, we all know. Ultimately, they're targeting all of us. But first, they had to take care of the patriots. They had to target us on every level. And as we know, I mean, Obama, gosh, people have written books and will continue to about how he targeted, patriot journalists and basically anybody that they could target using the levers of power, that they control. They did it. But they legalized this propagandizing of Americans, and things have just really, I think, gotten to a point where they're really about to boil over. And I just don't think people really have that much more patience for the insanity. And as much as we love Trump, and as much as I've documented and understand, at least I think anyway, I understand his reasoning for pushing the thing that goes in your arm. People are just absolutely sick and tired of hearing Trump. As much as they love him, we just don't want to hear him pushing that anymore. And I have to be honest with you, even me, even myself understanding it and talking about it, and I've done, shows, I've had discussions with Gene about it. And despite all that, when I hear Trump in an interview, like I did the other day talking about it, I still, not only do I cringe, but it still causes me anger. It causes me frustration. And I have to go through this process again. It's like, it's this strange thing, it's like, I understand what's going on, but at the same time, it's really hard to listen to. And I think people can identify with that. I mean, people have been telling me that right from the beginning. And that's the reason I've been talking about this issue so much, is because it's been the biggest, I guess, difficulty that people have had with Trump. And in fact, a lot of people, a lot of well-meaning, good people, patriots out there, who I don't think are, trolls at all, who are quote unquote anti-Trump, are because Trump they don't really understand, in my view, they don't understand the issue fully. They don't understand the full scope and context of what it is that Trump is doing. But there are good people out there who simply do not trust him because of this issue. And like I said, in this case, I think it's because people, lack the full scope of the information. They might, if they knew the full story, maybe they would have a different opinion, or maybe they have heard it. Maybe they've heard me talk about it and others talk about it, and they don't buy it. But the point I'm making here is that people are just, we've been patient for a very, very long time. We understand that this situation has had to unfold. It's a process. It's going to continue to be a process. It's not going to be something that is going to be over right away. But I think the point here is that patriots need to see the beginning of this exposure and this disclosure. We need to start seeing high profile arrest, major movement, in order, I think, for people to really have for a lot of folks, really to have their faith rejuvenated, and really to avoid going down a road toward patriots really having no other choice, at least in their assessment, than to take matters into their own hands. Because look, I'm not here to judge people's circumstances. I'm not calling for violence by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm not going to judge the scenario and the circumstances that people are in and what they feel is necessary, because things are continuing to devolve. And there just really aren't that many signs that, at least on the surface yet, that things are happening that people can point to and say, well, all right, I believe that there are actually good guys and there's really justice being delivered behind the scenes, and have something to be able to hang their hat on. And I have a lot of sympathy for that. And I to be honest, I agree with it. I include myself in that camp with everybody else, even though I understand that it's a complex issue, that it's not going to be something that's going to be resolved on the timeline that I want it to. And I've talked about this many times. I recognize that, as I've said from the beginning, there is a time frame here. This is not just a blank check, an open book, where the white hats can just simply wait and just let this thing play out as long as they want without any sort of repercussions from the people. Now, again, do I believe that they have this all calibrated and figured out for the most part, and they using technology that I can't even begin to wrap my brain around to be able to gauge where we're at, and to be able to even look into the future, or perhaps even visit the future and understand how this thing had to play out? Listen, I've talked about this many times and put all that information out there. So absolutely, I recognize I don't have all the information that they have, but from the perspective of an ordinary American, and really from an ordinary citizen, I think probably I could speak for all the we the people, citizens out there of every nation, together with one voice. I think we can all basically say the same thing, that we need to see some proof. We need to see some action. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see if that action, what comes out of the Maxwell case, for me, I think is going to be pivotal. Because, as I've talked about, this case really is the trial of our lifetime. And I think really probably one of the biggest, most significant and important trials in history. And if we don't see, we saw justice in the Rittenhouse case, regardless of, like I said, regardless of whether it was a false flag or whether it's not, it was a just verdict. But will we see a just verdict in the Maxwell case? And what is going to happen? What is going to be exposed? Is the truth, all of the truth, going to actually start coming out? Or are we going to once again, like we expect, like what normally happens, are we going to see justice denied or a miscarriage of justice again? And I think, for me, this case is a very significant barometer of where we are and who's in control. Because, and I understand that, like 107 talks about, Gene talks about, when we're in the eye of the storm, it's going to feel like all hope is lost. So part of my brain, with everything that I'm expecting regarding the Maxwell case, part of my brain has to, sort of tuck that away and consider, well, all right, to what does that apply? Does it apply to this case? Because to me, this case is so pivotal. If we don't see justice in this case, I think it's going to be really, really difficult for people to process that and for people to accept that. And how that's going to actually manifest, if that ends up happening, I shudder to think about. Because I know that, not just here in America, but everyone around the world. I mean, I talked about the Rittenhouse case capturing the world's attention, but it's really nothing in comparison to the Ghislaine Maxwell case and Jeffrey Epstein. And everybody in the world is watching this, is going to be paying attention to this. And we know the significance of it. So if somehow, some way, justice is denied in this case, what is that going to indicate? And I think for a lot of folks out there, and I may even have to include myself, I don't know. But if that, God forbid, ends up happening and we don't see justice come out of this, and we don't see the exposure of all the elites and all the cabal, really, I'm going to have some major, major concerns and questions at that point about who's really, pulling the strings here and who really is in control, because of the significance of this case. I mean, we understand, and I don't need to go into Ghislaine Maxwell. People understand who she is. People understand who Epstein is. We understand the severity, and really, it's just the tip of the iceberg for this, like you said, this deep, dark world that's being exposed. And if somehow Ghislaine Maxwell can escape justice, and the people that we know we believe she's going to implicate can escape justice, well, at that point, I'm going to have some major questions. Let's just put it that way. Now, I don't believe that it's going to happen that way, but there's a part of me that is afraid that, with all these other distractions going on right now, there's a part of me that is afraid, because I'm so used to, as we all are, like I talked about, we're so used to justice being denied that there's almost a part of you that comes to expect it. But the reason that I'm somewhat afraid about it is because not only do I fear how I would react to that situation, I fear how the people as a whole would react to that if there's no justice in this case, and what that would actually manifest in terms of, so let's just say, civil unrest. I shudder to think what this is going to do to the waning patience and waning morale of the Patriot movement. Because as I talked about, I started out this morning, there's a whole lot of infighting going on. There's a lot of finger pointing and people not trusting one another. And I understand that, because, part of that is legitimate. There's a lot of, I believe there's a lot of infiltration in the Patriot movement. And it's still difficult for me to identify exactly who people are and where they're coming from and whether or not they're legitimate. But for me, really what it comes down to is just using that discernment, and do I resonate when I listen to an individual, regardless of who it is? Do I, on a spiritual level, do I resonate with them? Do I feel as if there's a connection there? Because to me, that's the most important question. There's a lot of people doing interviews and podcasts and videos out there, as we know. And you certainly, for most people, you don't have time to listen to all of them, and you have to be somewhat selective in the people that you choose to listen to. And I think that's a big portion of it in terms of who I choose. Now, there are a lot of people out there. Some of them have, they sound really intelligent and they have some really interesting analysis. But at the end of the day, there's certain things that they either talk about or don't talk about that push me in one direction or another. And it's not because, I'm not one of those individuals who just will only listen to people who, like an echo chamber, only listen to people who are going to confirm their views. I actually like different viewpoints. But, I take one example, with the quantum financial system, and I've talked about this before. I just really don't have the ability to listen to and really take seriously folks out there who are denying that there's a quantum financial system. And that's, again, people can disagree with me on that because there are some very high profile, very popular internet personalities out there who are of that persuasion, shall we say. But I just simply cannot believe that. And so therefore I just kind of gravitate away from folks like that. But really, all of this ties back into the issue of people being tired and weary, and they just don't want to live in a world anymore where there's no center, where there's no baseline of truth, where there's nothing that you can just simply accept as reality anymore. Whether it's people that you listen to online, or whether it's, look, and I understand, and this, like I said, this is a big part of what's driving so much of the anger and the frustration and the infighting within the community. But I do believe that it's very important. While we acknowledge all these things to be true, I think it's very important for people to, on a daily basis, remind themselves, and people, I do really think, myself included, need to be reminded on a daily basis at this point what we're fighting for, how we got here, and ultimately what's really important and what we have our faith in. And did we really think that as we got closer and closer to this climactic moment, that it wouldn't get more difficult? That we weren't going to have to hang on by our fingernails at the end? Because I've always viewed this situation that way. I never really viewed it like that it would just, it would get bad for a while, but then it wouldn't get that bad, and we'd see some intervention before it really got that bad. I think a lot of people, whether they acknowledge it or not, kind of have that mindset. But the deeper we get into this process, the more folks, I think, are also starting to understand that it's not going to be that way. Talking about that Red Sea moment, and that water is rising. That water, it got all the way up to their eyeballs before it started to recede, or up to their noses, right? And all of us are starting to experience that. It's getting hotter and hotter, and the water level is rising. The consequences of being a patriot are starting to be real for people. Being a patriot, you have to pay a price for that. In a tyrannical, in a sick tyrannical world like we're living in right now. Being a patriot isn't free. And all of us have had to make sacrifices up to this point to varying degrees. But like I say, as time goes by, in my view, those things are going to probably increase. They're going to get worse before they get better, because, that's the way that this process, I think, is going to play out. And I believe that right from the very beginning. And I took, and still do, take very seriously the phrase of a near-death experience for all of us. And how that's going to manifest itself is going to be different depending upon who you're talking about, and what choices that individual made on this whole journey, in this psychological war. What decisions people made, I think, in large part, is going to determine really the timeline that they end up on, and their future and their fate. But I mean, this is a war that so many people don't even realize that they're in. And that's really, I think, the great tragedy of our time is that we're living in a time where we really are at war. All of us, even though we're not carrying around rifles and we're not fighting a traditional war. We are in a battle for our lives, and they're trying to take us out not with bullets and bombs. They're using a fabricated situation. They're using poison that they're calling a what thing that goes in your arm. I mean, they're using silent weapons and poisons to take us out. And we're living through this time period, through this war. I mean, this is a war. It's a war of information. Information that is going to save your life if you take it seriously. And if you don't, well, we'll see how this all shakes out. But folks, I mean, they're putting this stuff in the kids now, 5 to 11-year-olds. In Israel, they're already rolling it out. They're rolling it out in my home state. And wouldn't you know it, nobody was talking about kids being sick or anything like that or in the hospital. And now, all of a sudden, that's starting to change. And just wait. And I mean, honestly, I could sit here all day long and I could probably rant and rave about parents making this decision for their kids and the insanity of it. But I'd be preaching to the choir. I know that, but I still, at some level, I can't even believe the complete failure and lack of logic and truth and common sense in people. And when I mentioned the center a few minutes ago, talking about people are tired of living in a world without a center. I mean, I think that's really what it is that I'm referring to. The center that really used to be, at least from what I remember growing up, it used to be that you could kind of take for granted that there was truth, logic, and common sense really reigned supreme in the minds and the hearts of most people. And I think it's been devastating to watch how that has become less and less true as time has gone on, and we've seen more and more of our fellow citizens just completely fail at that level. And that really is, the core of your humanity, in my view. Your ability to recognize the truth and your ability to stand for the truth. It's a core of who you are. It's part of what makes you human. And we've gotten to a point in our society where they poisoned us and they've dumbed us down and they've sickened us so much that they've taken that from people. And they've given them, a bunch of propaganda and lies and false sense of security and superiority in exchange for their truth, logic, and common sense, which really is their soul, their identity, their humanity. And the tragic part is that people don't even recognize it. These people, how gone they are, how vacant, how empty. Now they walk around with this, this moral superiority feeling that, they're wearing their mask the right way, and they've got all of their shots and they've got all their boosters, and they just want to police the entire world, and they think that that's virtue. They think that that's what makes them a good person. I mean, it's sick and it's sad, but at the same time, it's a reality. And it's a reality that we need to deal with. And as much as I wish it were otherwise, it's not. And we've become infested. Humanity really has become infested with this vacant spiritually vacant, authoritarian sickness. And people who can feel it, especially, the most awake of us out there, the patriots, I mean, you know, we feel it the most acutely. And I'll tell you, it's hard. It gets harder and harder to deal with it. It gets harder and harder to live knowing the truth in the world of lies, where all of these cowards and phonies have been put in positions of authority. And to know that at some level, we allowed this to happen. And then at the same time, to get so frustrated because you also know on an individual level, there's only so much you can do, and you have to endure a lot of this because there's really no other option. But I'll tell you, what it really comes down to for people as this process is accelerating, and again, a lot of people have already been there and have already had these experiences, but the deeper we get into this process, the more people are going to have to start making decisions about where they draw the line, what they're going to accept and what they're not going to accept. Some people drew that line a while ago, and refused to put a mask on their face. And my hat's off to them. I mean, to be honest with you, I was not one of those people because I had, I have a job, I have a family to think about. I really, in the beginning, I just, I accepted. Okay, fine, I'll wear a mask on my face to keep my job and this and that. But now, to be honest with you, I'm at a point where I'm getting to a point where I can't even. I'm having a difficult time even doing that. In fact, I've been taking some heat at work over that. Instead of putting it up over my mouth and my nose, wearing it like a chin diaper, the way that a lot of people do out there who need to go through the motions so that they can keep their heads above water, financially speaking. This is what people have done, and I've kind of moved more in that direction. And the more that I do, the more that I realize, because again, when I first started wearing the mask and everything back in the beginning of COVID, I didn't know then what I know now. I didn't know about the masks themselves, what they put in them, the graphene oxide, all that stuff. I had no idea. Then, I also didn't really know I didn't understand the danger of wearing a mask, period, breathing in your own CO2 all day long, the damage that does to your immune system, your body in general. I didn't understand any of that stuff. But the more that I come to understand the realities of the world, and it gets harder and harder to live in the world. And I think that people are all feeling, the same thing, because again, the tyranny is ratcheting up, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse until there's finally a breakthrough of one kind or another. Whether it's what I expect to happen and what most of the audience expects to happen, or whether it goes in a different direction. One way or another, this thing is really ratcheting up toward a real climactic moment, I do believe. And I, for one, I welcome that, because it's as much as I enjoy discussing and going through these issues with the audience and analyzing. I mean, like I said, I'd be lying if I led folks to believe that I want this process to drag out any longer than it's absolutely necessary. And it's hard for me too, at certain points, to maintain my faith and morale, because I'm human too, and I get disappointed, and I get angry and go through all the same emotions as everybody else. And like I say, it's important for all of us, I think, to voice our frustrations and to voice the truth about where we're at and what we're feeling, as a whole, as a collective, we the people. And that's really so much about what the show is about. What I've always intended for it to be is a sounding board for the true patriots of the world out there. Because we're always, we're always the last ones, really. We're always kind of pushed into a corner where we're the ones who never really get heard. And we're the ones really who need to unify the most. And I wanted to be a part of that. So again, thank you for allowing me to be a part of that, for trusting me, for trusting my analysis. I mean, again, I'm just an ordinary American, despite the fact that some folks have thought that I'm not. A lot of people have thought that I'm General Flynn. Some people have said Robert David Steele. Folks have made a lot of claims, or had some ideas about my identity. But I can assure folks, I'm not either one of those two, and I'm not any kind of prominent individual. I'm just an ordinary American who's sharing his journey, and by doing that, hopefully being a rallying point and a voice for we the people. So thank you so much again for joining me this morning. I'm going to let everybody go and wish you all a good day. I'll be back soon with another report. Please do everything you can to support the show. Hit that like button, subscribe to all the different platforms, share with like-minded people, and I'll be back soon. God bless everybody. Patriot out.